Shavuot Tov Moedim Simcha. Good morning. So we're going to tell two stories. One story we have of a chassid who is a chassid of the Mittel Rebbe, the second Rebbe Chabad, Reb Dov Ber Schneerson, who is the son of the Alter Rebbe, and later he becomes a chassid of the Mittel Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek, the son-in-law and also grandson of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Reb Yosef Driven. So Reb Yosef Driven is a chassid that was had tremendous knowledge and was able to teach very well chassidus. And both the Mittel Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek would send chassidim who they wanted to get a better education in the teachings of chassidus to this chassid Reb Eliyahu Yosef Driven. So he lived in the city of Driven. Later he became the rabbi of a city called Plotsk. So when he becomes the Rabbi Plotsk, he's suddenly struck with a tremendous illness, and the doctors examine him, and they tell him that unfortunately there's no healing of this illness, and he's going to pass away. He can't continue to live with this horrible illness that he had. Now, Rabbi Eliyahu Driven, being a chassid and a yid, meaning to say, he knows that everything comes from Hashem. And Hashem is Roifei Chaylim, one who could heal, and also knows the teachings of Chassidus that the world goes according to Torah. Torah decides dictates how things are in the world. So he thought to himself when the doctors explained to him what his condition was, that in his knowledge of the laws of kashrus, of kosher, we know that the law is that what's the definition of an animal that's considered treif? When we say something is treif, doesn't mean that it's not slaughtered kosher. It doesn't mean that it's not it doesn't have the right hashgacha. Treif means an animal that based on its health and the examination after the slaughtering, they could see that the animal was not going to live out the year because the animal was diseased, whether it had a punctured lung or other signs that the animal was sick, and therefore halachically we're not allowed to eat meat that's not kosher, meaning that's treif, that can't live for the next 12 years. That's what's the halachic definition of treif. So there's not always is there an agreement of what is considered, what is K'Ariel, but what is considered treif. There's sometimes disagreements between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. We know that there's different laws. What would be considered a kosher animal or a non-kosher animal with the laws of treifus, meaning how healthy the animal is. And Rabbi Eliyahu Driven knew that his condition that the doctors explained him was something that was of a disagreement between the Ashkenazic authorities and the Sephardic authorities. According to the Ramah, who is the head of the Ashkenazic authorities, ad hayom, till today, this is considered a non-kosher animal and the animal would die, and therefore it cannot be eaten. But the Beis Yosef, the Sephardic authority, which is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, disagrees with this opinion of the Ramah, and he holds that the animal is kosher. This is not a disease that the animal would die from. So the Rebbe Eliyahu Driven said an amazing thing, which is such a telling story of life, of how someone views life and Torah. He says, well, I live now in Russia or Ukraine, wherever he lived, wherever Driven or Plotsk is, and I don't want to, so I'm in the authority of the Ramah. So according to the Ramah, the disease that I have is something that an animal would die from. I'm going to move to Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, it's according to the laws, it goes according to the rulings of the Beis Yosef, of Rabbi Yosef Karo, of the Shulchan Aruch. And therefore, over there, my condition, an animal could live. And he packed his bags and his family, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael, in the place where the halacha is, that someone with his condition, or an animal with his condition, but he applied it to himself, can live. And he actually, those doctors told him in Plotsk that he wouldn't live the year, he ended up living an additional 23 years, and he passed away on the 12th of Tammuz in the year 5625, 1865. So it's an amazing story connected really to the Parsha of Shmini, where we see Koach HaTorah. Torah dictates the facts on the ground. If Torah says that the person will live, then Torah says, Rapi, he could be healed. And this is not a condition that's deathly, but it depends where you live. If you live where the Ramah is the Mord Asra, that's one thing. If you live where the Beis Yosef is the Mord Asra, then maybe it's a different result. That's the first story. The second story is a story of the famous story of Rameir of Parmashlam. Rameir of Parmashlam was a big tzaddik. There's many stories told of the Rebbe Rameir. He lived in a city called Parmashlam, and he was the son of, I think his father, his name was Reb Aaron Parmashlan, a Chassidish Rebbe. And Rameir Parmashlan was not just was he a big Rebbe later when his father passed away and he took over his father's dynasty, but as a small child, from the young age, he was a super child. He was very smart, witty, always had something, he was clever. Everyone would like to chepe with him a little. The Chassidim would like to get his attention because he was always had something smart to say. And not only that, he was also a very special child. Hey, Rebecca, good mode. He was also a very special child. He would go around and Rameir Parmashlam would go and he would collect every Friday money for the poor so they could have money. And he knew also, being that Thursday was, he would collect Thursday for food, money for the poor for Shabbos to give out. And being Thursday is a day of the market, right? So he figured that he would always go to the market where people were selling, making money, looking for bracha, So he would collect the money from the butchers and from the people that would come to the market. And he would collect a little bit, a nice handsome amount of money that he was able to pass out as a young boy to the poor. So he comes one for Thursday to the market, and Shimon the butcher is in the market looking to buy cattle for his slaughterhouse to sell meat for Shabbos. But we know again in the laws of kosher, if a butcher buys a cow and the cow ends up being non-kosher, treif, like I said, the halachic ruling would be this animal is not kosher. So then there's a great loss for the butcher and for the income, because then you have to sell it as secondary meat and you don't get the same return on investment. So it's always a risk what animal you buy. It's hard to know what's strafe from the outside, from the eyes, from the naked eye. You can't see if the animal so not always can you see a sign how healthy the animal is. So he was in the market looking at the different cattle, wasn't sure which ones to buy. And he sees little mayor coming around collecting his money for the poor. So he says, Merrill, come here. He says, I'll give you a few coins if you tell me if this animal's kosher or not. Well, Meir was this young child, but he also was no fool. And if he wants this privileged information, he's going to have to pay more than his regular donation on a Thursday. He says, well, for this kind of information, I'm willing to give it to you, but you would have to tell me, you have to pay me a half of a klotzk, whatever the amount was, to $50 instead of your regular $5. So the butcher thinks for a second and he says, okay. So he gives him the money and he says, no, don't buy this animal. It's not kosher. So he says, well, what about the next one? He points to the next animal. He says, well, that's another question, new information that requires another $50. So now Shimon's already wondering. He says, he was thinking to himself, whatever the money goes to good cause, right? Meir gives the money to the poor. So he said, and he's also the son of tzaddikim, and he was known to be a special child. So he says, okay, I'll give you another $50, another 50 krutsk, whatever it is. And he gives him the money, and he says, well, this one is perfect, it's kosher. So he's a little hesitant, doesn't know if this is just fooling around, but he buys the animal that Meir points out, and his friend who's there bought the other animal, just happened to be. And as Meir said, his animal was kosher, and his colleague's animal, his competition animal was non-kosher, was treif. Next week, Meir comes, and Shimon comes over to him. He says, okay, tell me again, tell me if this animal's kosher. He says, same price as last week. You want me to tell you? You have to give me 50, or whatever the amount is, of a large amount of money for the poor. So he agrees, and this continues for weeks. And then as it goes on, Shimon realizes that he's never missed his target. Whenever he says an animal is kosher, it's kosher. Whenever he says it's non-kosher, it's not kosher. And now Shimon's becoming very wealthy, because he has 100% return on investments, while other butchers are buying meat that not necessarily are kosher, and also they're getting the leftovers of Shimon, right? So if Shimon takes all the healthy animals, it also makes it more likely that the other ones are buying the non-healthy animals. And he says, Meir, let's make a contract. He says, there's no contract. Every time you want me to tell you an animal, I'll give it to you for the same price. So this continues, and the butchers are really getting upset because they feel that there's something not right. And they thought that there was foul play, that maybe Shimon was paying the rabbis in a corrupt way to rule that his animal was kosher and their animals were non-kosher. So they went to the Rav, to the chief rabbi, and he says, let's examine. Whatever the ruling was correct. That his animals were kosher, and theirs were either were kosher or not kosher, but they didn't have the 100% success that Shimon had. So there's nothing they could do. So they decided they hired a PI, a private investigator, to watch to see what Shimon doing. And they found out that Shimon every Thursday meets little Meir Palm Shlam, and he walks around the market and he points, this is kosher, this is not kosher, this is kosher, this is not kosher. So they went over, they don't know what he's pointing, they don't know what's going on. So they go over to Meir and they say, what's going on? So he says, nothing. He pays me, not handsomely for the tzedakah if I tell him which animals are kosher. And it works, and Meir says it's great. He doesn't have to collect so much. He's able to give more money to the poor. So they also wanted in on this. So in the meantime, Meir is walking around the whole market, the whole Thursday, telling each butcher what animals are kosher, what's not kosher. Everyone is happy, right? So Shimon maybe is not making as much as he was making before, but everyone is 100% return on investment. And this continues until his teacher finds out what he's doing. And his teacher tells him that he's not allowed to, he has to stop this immediately. He's not allowed to do this anymore. And later, this teacher comes to the father, who was the Rebbe and was also his Rebbe. He told him, he says, oh, very good, you told him, Meryl is a special child, but he has to know, Sari Dashem L'Reyav, you have to keep secrets, not just because you see prophecy, doesn't mean you always have to share. So that's the story of the holy Meir Pamshlani. He's mamash, he was known as a mamash, a big tzaddik, just a Torah that he said before we go to the halacha class. Meir Pamshlan used to be able to climb the mikveh in the ice. The mikveh was very high on top of the hill in the city of Parmeshlan. He lived in a city where a lot of people were ready, from the maskilim, from the intellectuals that were against Torah, and they would always try to make fun of Meir. Then they saw that he was able to walk up a mountain of ice, and they tried as much as they tried, they can never walk it up. They always slipped and fell down. So they once went to him, they said, Reb Meir, how is it that you could always walk up the mountain and we can't? So he said the very famous line, As mir zugebunden eid bin, fällt man nicht unten. When you're tied up to above, you don't fall down. Meir he's tied to Hashem, so he always has a spiritual string that helps him elevate. But if you're not tied, then you're going to slip and slide, which was also a lesson deep into what they're doing, what they were behaving in their life. Okay, so those are the stories we have, and let's learn a little bit of halacha. So we are holding again in the laws of Shemoneh Esrei and halacha 18. Okay, so the halacha says as follows: Aser leishev b'toich arba dalad amas shel hamispal tefillah Shemoneh Esrei. This is a question. I think Aaron brought it up a few times. This is a complicated question because not all shuls have the kind of space that's required for this halacha. Meaning, you can't sit if you are within 4 arm lengths, which is between 6 to 8 feet, depending on the halacha and how we look at the length of 4 amas or an amma, in the space of a person who's davening the Amidah, Shemoneh Esrei. Bein lefanav, of whether you're sitting in front of the person, bein la'achrav, or behind the person, bein minat sadim, or from the side. So the person basically who's davening Shemoneh Esrei kind of requires a square, a 4 arm lengths from northeast, south, and west, which is a lot of space. But if the person who's sitting is also doing something that's connected to prayer at that time, then you could sit. Let's say you're saying Shema, which is something you have to sit for. Okay, here we're obviously talking about a situation where this comes up in our most common space is when a person davens Shemoneh Esrei, let's say longer than someone else, or someone shorter than someone else, and you finish Shemoneh Esrei, and someone behind you is still davening. Could you just sit down waiting for the Amidah? So here it seems like you can't, because you're not doing anything for tefillah. You're not like if you're davening is something else, but you're just waiting. So then you're sitting in front of someone who's davening. It's not permitted. And here he says not just in front, but on side or behind. Again, v'yesh makil, and therefore, but it's a complicated. So therefore, there's those who are more lenient in this law. Even if you're not in the middle of praying yourself, let's say you want to sit while you're praying, and this person's standing. But you're learning Torah by mouth. So you're learning Torah, but you're not praying. Then you don't have to distance yourself. Again, this becomes complicated when the shul is full a square 4 amas is a lot of space. That's a square 8 feet for someone to take for their space. is a lot of space in a shul. That's usually, if the shul is empty, something else. But if you're talking about during davening, or some, again, and if one person wants to daven long, does he have the right or she have the right to acquire all that space, and where others want to sit down? Vayarid Dvar Hashem, however, one who's God-fearing, Lo yeshuv them espal tefillah Shemoneh Esrei kim lo einav. You shouldn't sit in front of anyone who is who's davening Shemoneh Esrei within his line of vision. So that's where we're more careful. Sit to the side. I feel even if you want to say Shema, and Shema we say sitting, that's the halacha. We try to. But to the sides and behind, we're not careful. So the bottom line of this is that although we kind of taking ourselves through the law, what we conclude is that if you're within the eye vision, that not to sit, but the sides and the back, we're not so careful. And to stand in front of someone, that of course you don't have to get out of their space if you're standing. Okay, this is a law again where we spoke last week. Some people get annoyed if you're sitting right in front of them, but also the people have to be considered on both sides. If someone wants to daven specifically long, and that happens sometimes, and to take all that space when others want to sit down and they're tired is also selfish. So we have to be considerate on both sides. All right, so here we say, that's why if you want to daven a long Shemoneh Esrei, and you want to be considerate, go to the side, where no one would sit in front of you, and that shows that you're considerate, and then you could daven longer, and you're not bothering anyone. All right. Let's see the footnotes. It's forbidden to sit alongside this person who's praying the Shemoneh Esrei, i.e., in a circle around the person praying within a radius of 6 to 8 feet. Again, that's a large amount of space, especially in a full shul. I mean, you're talking about, let's say, you go to a shul sometimes, you're both davening privately. So then, to sit down, if you walk into an empty shul, or a very large shul, there's a lot of space, and specifically to sit in front of someone because you want to, it's my right to sit down. Also, that's also inappropriate. But we're talking about, but in a place where where it's kind of full, and we have to figure out a balance, as the Kitzur does. All right. Also, engage as long as you're engaged in the order of prayer, though he is not involved in Shemoneh Esrei or Kriya Shema, but in other parts of the synagogue service, which are only minhag custom. It means let's say you're davening something ashrei, and you want to sit down, so it doesn't say anywhere you have to sit down. So then, according to some opinions, you could sit down if you're davening. Others, he says, are mekel, are more lenient, and even as long as you're studying Torah, reading out loud or speaking words of Torah. Why is that? So the point of what he's saying is, what's the reading out loud? Because it says befiv. It says they could have said Ela Shalaim Torah if he's learning Torah. Why does he add he's learning Torah befiv with his mouth? Is because by learning Torah with your mouth, again, a shul is a place where you could either make it a pleasant experience for everyone, or people could get on each other's nerves. And so it doesn't mean that you should start learning loud and being disruptive to the person who's trying to daven, because this Kitzur says you should read with your mouth. The idea of reading with your mouth would be to show that you're not just sitting, that you're learning Torah. Because if you're just looking at something, people may not know. But if people hear that you're learning Torah, so then it's a respect. But you're not doing it to do it in a way that's loud, because that's what the Kitzur says, and then you're disrupting and the attention of the person who's trying to daven. Again, number one rule is like when I got my smicha. So the first thing the Rosh Kollel told us was there's the 5th Shulchan Aruch, which is common sense and decency. So you have to remember the common sense and decency rule, and don't be disruptive and don't be offensive, dafket, just in spite. Okay. Number 64. Even if the distance is greater than 4 amas. Okay. So we kind of shifting in different ways. We start off saying is that a person who's davening kind of takes for themselves a parameter of 6 to 8 feet, square feet around them. So unless you're davening, you shouldn't sit down. There's those who are lenient and say if you're learning a little bit out loud with your mouth, then you could sit. Then there's those who say that no, we're not so careful on the sides and behind, but you shouldn't sit right in front of the person. But that in front of the person is even further than the length of 6 to 8 feet, 4 amas. It doesn't say how far that goes. I mean, if someone's davening in the back of the shul, does that mean that straight to the Arna Kodesh no one could sit? Again, everything has to be taken into perspective. So we finish off and says that Even if you're saying Shema, you shouldn't be singing in front of someone, but alongside or behind is not an issue. And all the objections mentioned above refer to sitting only, but standing is not a problem. So to summarize it, because again, this comes up to questions all the time. Number one is if for the person who's davening, if you plan on davening long, so I know everyone feels the right that this is my shul as much as the next person's shul, and this is my place and this is his place or her place. That's all nice and good, but common decency and respect bein adam lechaveroi is number one. So therefore, if you want to daven long, to be considerate to go to a place where you're not going in a way that you're not going to be causing this line of disruption. But in the event that that didn't happen, and the person who wants to sit is I don't know who this is. And the person who wants to sit is considering it. Ariel, did you invite someone called Farnak?
Yes, I did. Yes, yes.
So if in a situation where the person whatever didn't know or you finished early, so it's the conclusion is that to sit on the side or behind someone is not so bad. To sit in front of someone you shouldn't. So to sit, I mean, we have it say a lot of times in shul where there's benches, right? There's rows of benches or rows of chairs. So you literally, one chair's in front of the next chair. So either stand and wait or try to sit to the side. That's really the conclusion, the best we could do. Let's do one or two more laws because we started 10 minutes late. We'll start a few minutes, we'll go a little later. Okay. So if the person who's sitting is weak can mean old or what have you, or it's hard for them to stand. So you shouldn't be moicha. You shouldn't be moicha. Again, really, this is one of the a shul is a place of kibesi base tefillah lechola amim. It's a place of prayer. It's a place. There's the Alter Rebbe writes in Likutei Torah that there's because of all this prayers, there's a lot of built up tension that we're not aware of in shul. That's why there's a lot of silly and wasteful disagreements and bickering, banter and shul, where people open the window, close the window, all these things. You have to know that there's a source for it. Not down in Chassidus, where it talks about these ideas. So we have to just be careful that to be decent and not stop protesting and shouting at someone if they sit in front of you. Being forgiving is always the best. Okay, he should not be asked to stand, but be allowed to remain seated if the person is weak or not feeling well. Okay. Yoshev koidem. What happens? There's another thing. Let's flip it around. I'm sitting, and you want to daven Shemoneh Esrei. I have to get up because you decided to daven Shemoneh Esrei. I'm sitting down in shul. Obviously, something is not right in the sequence of events, right? Why? Because usually a minyan goes, everyone's together. So someone's not together in this scenario, right? So you're sitting and someone wants to daven next to you. Or in front of you. Then you don't have to stand. He's coming into your space. Again, you have to really put this on a low thermometer. But if he stands to daven behind you, which means you're sitting now in front of him or her, you should try to stand. Again, this requires both sides to be super sensitive. Oh, this is all when it's happening in the house. But if this is a set minyan, a shul, we call it in a proper shul, not just a set place of davening, that everyone has the right to daven. So even if you sat down first, you have to stand because the person who davens has the right to daven. It's the place of prayer. Again, the complication of this law is where today it's become more of the custom where the spectrum of how long someone davens, he or she, is wide. Some people daven a normal amount of time. Some people like to daven very long, and and doesn't always. So you have to be considerate. I'm very strong of that opinion. Okay, although the person who placed himself or herself to pray facing a seated person acted improperly. Okay, you shouldn't be standing to daven behind the person who's sitting, and then make that person get up because you want to daven. Yet Discretion calls upon the seated person not to remain seated. Okay, that's if he's davening behind you. In other words, a place of business where people gather regularly to pray in a minyan. What's a place of that's dedicated for davening? That's not a shul. What do we like? I have over here in my office. We have a minyan that for mincha ma'ariv. It's not a shul, but it's a place that we daven every day mincha ma'ariv. So at the time of davening, it would be considered a makom, a place of tefillah, not a base of knesses. Let's do one more here. Here's another question that comes all the time. Again, 4 amas is 8 feet or 6 to 8 feet. It's a lot of space. So if you're trying to, you want to move, you want to walk, right? Someone's davening. Could you walk in front of a person who's davening? So it says it's forbidden to pass a person within 4 amas, which is again 6 to 8 feet, if someone's praying Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah. If someone davens and the next person finished, and someone is standing behind in umispal, v'adayin legomer hasn't finished. Here's another thing. Let's say you're davening, you're both davening Shemoneh Esrei. You're both standing. You're standing in front of someone and you're finished earlier. Could you back up to do the 3 steps, say shalom, backing into someone else's space? So he says no. If you finish early, you shouldn't back up into someone's space because you want to do those shalom. Because it's like you're walking in front of a person. But so he says that you should pass by on the side, move to the side. Certainly behind them, if you're behind the person, to move backwards, obviously not a problem. Let's do one footnote here. See paragraph 12. Okay, I think we're going to stop here. Are there any questions on what we've learned? Wonderful. Okay, everyone. Modim l'simcha. For the rest of this week, we're going to have 2 more classes. We're going to have tomorrow night's class at regular time at 8 p.m. Seattle time or Pacific time and 11 p.m. Eastern time, New York time in the Likutei Torah on Pesach. We're going to learn something on Shvi Shal Pesach. And then we're going to have the shmooze on Monday night, regular time, 8 p.m. Pacific time and 11 p.m. Eastern time. And we're not going that to be the last class for this week because of Yom Tov. I think we could have maybe still the Sicha class. I'll let you guys all know. Laila Tov, take care. Have a wonderful.
Thank you. Good moment.
Good night, everyone.